Will the guests please rise for the arrival of the official party and remain standing for the national anthem, which will be sung by EMN 3 Hurtado. Nuclear Power Training Unit, Charleston, arriving. Staff, arriving.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in there, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Please remain standing for the invocation. Chaplain Brady.
If you're willing, let us pray. Eternal and loving God, we humbly bow our heads and lift our hearts to you in thanksgiving for the grand accomplishment of these sailors gathered together today in this graduation. God, it was you that put it into the hearts of these graduates to join the world's greatest Navy and pursue the path of a nuke, leading them to Nuclear Power Training Unit, Charleston. It was you, O God, that infused these graduates with grit and grace to not only excel in their studies, but to navigate through the numerous challenges they encountered on their journey as that has culminated in this graduation. O merciful Lord, remember and bless the families near and far who believed and supported this graduating class, as well as the instructors and staff of our training unit who helped guided them to success. And as this class prepares to go out into the fleet at the tip of the spear wherever they are assigned, help them to know, O God, that you will go before them and stand with them as the one who orders our steps and props us up on every leaning side, so that no error becomes eternal, no fall becomes fatal, and no problem is more powerful than your grace to bring us through. We ask all these things in the name that is above every name. Amen.
Please be seated. Captain Peters, Captain Kep, Technical Director, Mr. Eshelman, Moored Training Ship 701 Commanding Officer, Commander Soligowski, Command Master Chief, distinguished guests, family, friends, welcome to Naval Nuclear Power Training Unit Charleston graduation ceremony for Class 2206. I am Commander Fitzpatrick, the Executive Officer of NPTU, and we are pleased that you could join us as we recognize the sailors who dedicated so much of their time and effort in this final phase of their training. While we recognize those students who stand out from their peers, it is important to remember that each student dedicated thousands of hours in pursuit of this moment. Today is about the accomplishments of our sailors as they complete the Naval Nuclear Propulsion Training Pipeline. Please join me in a round of applause for our families, friends, and shipmates who played a large part in our sailors' success. You have our heartfelt thanks. It is now my pleasure to introduce the NPTU Charleston Commanding Officer. Captain Reed Kep is a career submariner who has had command of USS Colorado and is now in his major command tour commanding Naval Nuclear Power Training Unit Charleston.
All right, well, good morning, y'all. All right, I've been in South Carolina long enough I can say that. Good morning, y'all. Hey, well, it's a hot one, so there's 3 of these today, so if any of you are saying like we probably lucked out by getting the first one, I would agree. But I'm going to be here for 2 more, so I'm just smiling at you. This is not real. I'm really envious of you. So anyway, welcome to Charleston, and welcome to the USS Yorktown. I'm just going to make a few quick points before I turn it over to our guest speaker today, and give some thanks. First, I'd like to thank the Patriots Point staff here. We do this every 8 weeks, where we send about 400 enlisted and officer nuclear trained operators to our submarine and our aircraft carrier fleet. So every 8 weeks we have this venue. I can't think of a better place to send our future operators off to our forward deployed ships and those in the maintenance availabilities from the USS Yorktown, a ship that has seen combat action. And so thank you for being here today. Thank you, Yorktown staff, for putting this on for us. The other thing I would like to give thanks to is to my staff. A little bit about my staff. My staff is about 1,400 active duty military staff, about 300 civilians, and at any time we have about 1,200 students at our training command. We're a 24/7, 365-day-a-year operation, and yes, that includes Christmas. That's what it takes to certify our nuclear operators to the high standard that we do, and to keep the needs of our submarines and our aircraft carriers manned and ready to surge to combat when needed. So I want to thank our staff. They're working right now. They're getting it done. And so I just want to say thank you to our staff. Our administrative staff, which you see here, our media staff, is making this event happen, and they are controlling the transfer and the pay and the wellness of all of our sailors that are making these major life transitions. So thank you to my staff as well. Hey, a little bit about Prototype. I'll talk just a little bit of education about Prototype. So like I told you about our staff number, so right now we are training all nuclear operators here in Charleston, South Carolina. We have 3 moored training ships, which were converted nuclear-powered submarines, 2 moored training ships that have actual operating nuclear reactors that we train our sailors and our officers on. We also use high-fidelity, full immersive simulation technology to supplement and build capacity to our training program. And we train all the different rates of our fleet. So let me tell you what those are. We're training our electronics technicians, which you'll see today, which are in charge of operating our reactors. Our electricians mates, which control our load distribution and other maintenance and services on our ships. our engineering laboratory technicians, which control our chemistry and radiological controls that keep our plants operating in a safe condition. And we also have our mechanical operators, which also operate our plant and keep things going day to day. And then our officer force for our submarines and our surface officers who are getting ready to report to their first aircraft carrier. And they've already served a tour at sea on a destroyer or some other combatant in the fleet. And so we're just wanted to tell you who we're certifying today. I know each of you have got, you know, one or two sailors that you're involved in here and seeing, and you know that. But I want to let you know what they are, what they're getting ready to do. They're getting ready to go to our aircraft carriers, whether that's a fast attack or whether that's our forward deployed aircraft carriers, our East Coast, West Coast, fast attack submarines, guided missile submarines, or strategic ballistic missile submarines are getting ready to report to those. Other opportunities that our sailors have here when they graduate, there's going to be some that come across the stage. You'll hear, you know, what their rate is, what their specialty is. But some have been picked up to be junior staff instructors. Those are hard-charging, top-performing sailors that have volunteered, in most cases, and that we have selected to stay here and work with me for another 2 years, continuing the training mission to certify our operators. Some are being selected for nuclear weld school, which is an awesome opportunity. We also have some that will be going to what we call propulsion plant local area network. So think cybersecurity for a nuclear propulsion plant network. So great opportunities for our folks. We also have some of our officers are what we call direct input officers. So they're not actually going to submarines or carriers. They've signed on a 5-year commitment to be committed to operating our nuclear plants and training our next generation of sailors. So they're going to walk across this stage, and I'm going to want them to go back and get back to work today. Maybe not today, but they're going to go finish their qualifications as a staff instructor and continue the training mission. So a whole host of folks, lots of opportunities. All these are spread across this room and will go feed out into all of our missions around the world and certainly here in Charleston. So I just want to educate the parents, the families on what that's all about. I have teenagers, and sometimes it's hard to get more than a good at the dinner table about what's going on. So as a parent, sometimes I think it's good to maybe hear some of the big picture about that. Okay, so I wanted to tell you about our folks that are graduating today. Let me get to know you a little bit. First, I would like to know if we have any veterans in the crowd, and if you're willing and able, would you please stand up so we could honor you? Thank you. All right, now, if you are a spouse of one of the sailors, officers graduating today, if you're willing and able, would you please stand? Thank you. And I can't thank you enough for what you do. You are going on this journey with your sailor, and I know that you are going to be sacrificing just as much or more in many cases. And I can probably get a little bit emotional knowing what you will endure, what you will support, how you will volunteer in your community, come alongside other shipmates, make adjustments in the different places you move. And I just am excited to see you be part of this. Thank you for that, and I just wanted to honor you with that. Okay, for all those that traveled here, you've clearly shown that this is a big deal to you, and you either really genuinely care and love for your sailor, or you're just ready to finally see them with a job and get out there doing something, and you're like, I want to make sure I see this to fruition. But I would like to just know who came from the farthest away. And this is an interactive piece. Who thinks they came from the farthest away? San Diego, all right. Where do you got? Okay, Los Angeles. Montana. Well, there's no submarines in Montana, so nobody's going to be close to home for you. Sorry about that. North Dakota. Did I get in Australia? Can anybody beat Australia? All right, Australia takes it. All right, great. All right. Okay, so here's what I want to make sure you know. The XO mentioned it. But make sure that you get an opportunity to get up here and take a photo whenever your sailor walks across the stage. And what they've told me whenever I had their outbriefs this week was they love being embarrassed by you. They love it. So things like, that's my sailor, I love my sailor, that type of thing, they love to hear it. They like the photos. We'll make sure we stop and give you a chance for a photo when you come across up here. So make sure you take advantage of it. You've clearly invested a lot in their success up to this point, and just by being here, it shows your support. And so thank you for that. Hey, and without any further comments from me, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker. I'd like to introduce Captain Peters, a career submariner. Also, as well as myself, he had command of USS Louisiana, also USS Georgia, and right now he's serving as a chief of staff in Kings Bay, Georgia, the hub for all of our East Coast strategic missile and guided missile submarines. So please welcome Captain Peters.
All right. Hey, morning, everybody. So, funny story, I'm not going to be able to top that. So it turns out what Captain Kep didn't tell you is he does this every couple weeks, so he's a pro at doing these speeches, and I am not. So this is, and then I was also told that I have like 5 minutes to speak because it's really hot out, and we got to get, the students are looking at me like I need to stop speaking, so I need to get out of here. So those were the constraints I was given. I was asked 3 weeks ago to do this, like prototype. I've been to prototype like since I was an ensign. And I've been in the Navy 29 and a half years, so you can do the math. So as I thought about prototype, like I haven't been a prototype since I was in the crowd graduating. So I had to go back and prepare a speech. So the speech really breaks down to a couple things. The first thing I had to do is find out how many days has it been since I was in their shoes. So I counted. It's 10,199 days ago. I was in their shoes. I was in a different uniform in a completely different site. And the other funny thing was when I got invited to this, like Charleston, I've never been to Charleston, South Carolina in my life until yesterday. So how is it? So the question for the students, and you can answer this when you get on the stage if you know the answer, how is it I can be a nuclear trained operator and have never been to Charleston in my life? Don't need to answer it right now. When you get on the stage, you know the answer, just tell me. All right, so like I said, I'm between you and the rest of your families here, so I'll keep it short. So I thought about what are the 3 things that I would want to know, and having lived 10,199 days since I was in your shoes, you're not going to remember this, but fortunately, we actually have video cameras now, and we can keep some of these things, so maybe you can replay this if you choose to. So I thought about 3 things that would pertain to all of you, the graduates. And, before I go into that, ladies and gentlemen, Captain Kep did a good introduction, and also recognize Admiral Tamman. I used to work with him in the Pentagon. He's in the crowd. And so this goes to, public speaking. I probably should have started with that, but I got that part, made it up. So 3 things to all of you students, 10,199 days. All right, so first of all, today marks a big day for all of you, okay? So the fact that you're graduating today, you completed nuclear power school and prototype training, means you're a basically trained nuclear operator. So the United States Navy now is going to send you to the fleet. And that's a big thing. And so here's 3 things to take along as you go off, go and do great things for your country. So first of all, Rickover's legacy. Now that you're a qualified nuclear operator, you join all of us, thousands, tens of thousands of us who've stood the watch before you. Okay, you join our family now. So that's the first thing. Welcome to the family. And there's 3 things in Rickover's legacy that I've taken from my 10,000 plus days of being a qualified nuclear operator, and I'm going to share them with you. First is we, so that's me and you, folks on the stage. We're caretakers of a complex, unforgiving technology, nuclear power. Never forget that. And to distill that, I need to do my job, you need to do your job. The second thing is we earn the trust of our nation through uncompromising high standards and a commitment to excellence. Another way to put it is, I back you up, you back me up. The third thing that I learned along the way is we're charged to uphold the standards of those who came before us. Those veterans who stood up on the stage, or stood up here at the beginning, those who have gone before us who no longer serve. We have a charge as nuclear trained operators to uphold their standards, okay, and continue the legacy of excellence. And graduation today marks, a milestone in your careers and in your life. And you've earned through this program a new obligation. And this is a lifetime obligation from this day until the day you pass from this earth. And it's to serve with integrity and purpose, okay? A lot of us who are alumni of this program have gone on to do great things for our nation, and we give back to our communities. We give back to our nation. It's this program, it's the legacy of Hyman Rickover that each of us carry going forward. The next thing I had to think about, you know, you're about to go into a Navy career, whether it's 5 years, 30 years plus, you know, your service in the Navy matters. You've probably been told this, but I'm going to give you some perspective since you're much closer to the fleet now. You're about to go on nuclear-powered aircraft carriers and submarines. And these vessels give our nation a unique ability to project power. Okay, a lot of big words, but basically we can go where we want to and, you know, defend our way of life. That's a big deal. And each of you are going to go serve on those platforms, you know, which we play a away game, and that's important. And many of you during your short or maybe long Navy careers are going to deploy to faraway places to confront the rise of China, to confront Russia. Those things are real. And, you know, since I was in your shoes till now, the world's changed a lot. And, you know, each of you are about to go serve in a very exciting time. So remember that, your service in the Navy matters. And last but not least, a little bit of life advice. So again, Ensign Peters to now, okay, what have I learned in 29 years? Keep it simple in life. There's 3 things I always talk to my sailors about, and these 3 things, if you do them, generally keep you on the straight and narrow. Show up to work on time. That's always a good thing, okay? Have a good attitude. You never know when you're going to have a down day, and the shipmate next to you, you know, if they keep that mantra of having a good attitude, they could be the difference between you having a good day and a bad day. And the last one is do your job. Pretty simple. Be a team player, okay? And again, it takes a team to do what we do. And hopefully, through the year-plus training that you've received to date in the nuclear power program, that's been instilled in you. Again, show up to work on time, have a good attitude, and do your job. All right, so congratulations, class 2206. I think that's the, yeah, I'm from class 9407. All right, thanks.
The Commanding Officer's Personal Excellence Award is presented to the sailor chosen from each crew who exhibits the highest degree of professionalism. The selection criteria for this award takes into consideration student effort, motivation, adaptability, personal development, and performance of duty. And I'll go back at this point and echo what I said before and what Captain Kep said before. As your sailors come up, please feel free, come up, take pictures. No restrictions there, please. Okay. Following sailors are the winners of the Commanding Officer's Personal Excellence Award. ETN 3, Sean Hart, headed to USS Pennsylvania. ETN 3, Christian Escalante, headed to USS Texas. ETN 3, Andrew Uffelman, headed to USS Tucson. EMN 3, Gracie Linville, headed to USS Georgia. EMN 3, Alexander Ortiz, headed to USS New Hampshire. And now the moment the class 2206 you have been waiting for. Let's continue on with MMN 3, Caleb Aguirre, headed to ELT school. Oh, dear. ETN 3, Matthew Ami, headed to USS Oregon. EMN 3, Macario Apodaca, headed to USS George Washington. Ensign Luciano Baranti, headed to USS Missouri. EMN 3, Michael Barre, headed to USS Georgia. MMN 3, Andrew Baina, headed to USS Carl Vinson. MMN 3, Matthew Beaumont, headed to USS George H.W. Bush. MMN 3, Nathaniel Benson, headed to USS George Washington. ETN 3, John Brady, headed to USS John C. Stennis. EMN 3, Kayla Brown, headed to USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. ETN 3, Derek Bryant, headed to PCU John F. Kennedy. Lieutenant Junior Grade Justin Boudin, headed to PCU Massachusetts. ETN 3, Joshua Burns, headed to USS Montana. ETN 3, Christopher Canary, headed to USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. ETN 3, Edward Capindian, headed to USS Santa Fe. Had to make sure I got that one right. Ensign Isabel Carlson, headed to USS South Dakota. MMN 3, Silas Carrillo, headed to USS Tucson. EMN 3, Aiden Chung, headed to USS Montana. MMN 3, Lamar Clark, headed to USS George Washington. ETN 3, Shane Clark, headed to USS Toledo. Ensign Matthew Clark, headed to USS Henry M. Jackson. ETN 3, Wesley Connell, headed to USS West Virginia. Ensign Trenton Papa, be a direct input officer, training at NPTU Charleston. MMN 3, James Corkle, headed to ELT school. MMN 3, Tristan Costa, headed to USS Pasadena. ETN 3, Matthew Crabtree, headed to USS George Washington. Ensign Brandon Cuenca, headed to USS Rhode Island. Ensign Gregory Dalton, headed to USS Nevada. ETN 3, Sterling Dawson, headed to USS Toledo. Ensign Vivian Dees, headed to USS Florida. EMN 3, Keegan DeKay, headed to USS Charlotte. Ensign Megan Eagleton, headed to USS North Carolina. EMN 3, William Edwards, headed to USS Colorado. MMN 3, Matthew Engelbrecht, headed to ELT school. Ensign William Farrell, headed to USS Illinois. MMN 3, Joshua Faulkner, headed to USS George Washington. EMN 3, Elizabeth Ferrari, headed to USS Georgia. MMN 3, Francisco Flores, headed to USS John C. Stennis. Mr. William Forney, headed to NPTU to train as a civilian. Ensign Ethan Frank, headed to USS Asheville. Ensign Cynthia Frimmett, headed to USS Ohio Blue. EMN 3, Toddy Galvez, headed to USS Harry S. Truman. MMN 3, Christopher Garbars, headed to ELT school. MMN 3, Caitlin Gaskell, headed to USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. EMN 3, Jared Graham, headed to USS Connecticut. EMN 3, Rory Griffiths, headed to USS Carl Vinson. MMN 3, Dominic Grote, headed to USS California. ETN 3, Bailey Groves, headed to USS Tennessee. ETN 3, Matthew Hamilton, headed to USS North Carolina. EMN 3, William Harris, headed to USS Theodore Roosevelt. EMN 3, Caleb Harvey, headed to USS Maryland. Lieutenant Junior Grade Raven Heath, headed to USS Virginia. MMN 3, Matthew Hines, headed to ELT school. MMN 3, Perfecto Hernandez Martinez, headed to USS Harry S. Truman. MMN 3, Michael Hildebrand, headed to USS Abraham Lincoln. Ensign Michaela Hawken, headed to USS Nebraska. Ensign Eric Howe, headed to USS Boise. EMN 3, Abel Hurtado, headed to USS Theodore Roosevelt. You can sing pretty damn well, too. Ensign Jose Irizarry, headed to USS Pasadena. MMN 3, Felipe Pacabo, headed to USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. MMN 3, Hannah Jouse, headed to USS George Washington. Ensign Devin Jones, headed to USS California. EMN 3, Richard Clem, headed to USS Indiana. EMN 3, Cameron Langenbach, headed to USS George H.W. Bush. MMN3 Jonas Guerrero, headed to welding school and then USS Nebraska. EMN3 Christopher Lowry, headed to USS Kentucky. EMN3 Zachary Looper, headed to USS Theodore Roosevelt. MMN3 Alme McCollum, headed to USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. Ensign Connor McDonnell, headed to USS Pennsylvania. EMN3 Gage McKenzie, headed to USS Connecticut. EMN3 Bradley Malmer, headed to USS George Washington. Ensign Riley Malone, headed to USS Seawolf. MMN3 Jonathan Marin, headed to USS George Washington. ETN3 Tyler Martin, headed to USS New Hampshire. MMN3 Miguel Martins, headed to USS Abraham Lincoln. ETN3 Genesio Mashuli, headed to PCU, Iowa. EMN3 Bryson Mays, headed to USS Maryland. Ensign Mary McCann, headed to USS Maine. EMN3 Justin McCaskill, headed to USS Gerald R. Ford. MMN3 Jeremiah McGinnis, headed to PCU John F. Kennedy. Ensign Sean McKenzie, headed to USS Hawaii. Ensign Patrick Mellenson, headed to USS John Warner. MMN3 Carter Miller, headed to welder school, then USS Texas. ETN3 Jeremy Miller, headed to USS Utah. Ensign Angelo Minetti, headed to USS Oregon. EMN3 Kyle Moon, headed to USS John C. Stennis. EMN3 Tyler Moore, headed to USS Gerald R. Ford. MMN3 Tanner Moorhead, headed to USS George H.W. Bush. Ensign Kiara Moorer, headed to USS Jimmy Carter. MMN3 Jaden Moreland, headed to USS Gerald R. Ford. MMN3 Calvin Moa, headed to ELT school. MMN3 Valeria Munez Flores, headed to USS George Washington. EMN3 Terrence Nerona, headed to USS John Warner. EMN3 Travis Wynn, headed to USS Abraham Lincoln. I got a little ahead of him there. MMN3 Trevor O'Brien, headed to ELT school. Ensign Paul Olkers, headed to USS Springfield. MMN 3, Zechariah Oliver, headed to USS Greenville. Ensign Cassandra Parks, headed to USS Michigan. ETN 3, Deep Patel, headed to USS Harry S. Truman. MMN 3, Jake Purr, headed to USS Nevada. Ensign Maria Perry, headed to USS Ohio. Ensign Matthew Peshek, headed to USS West Virginia. ETN 3, Tristan Pindro, headed to USS Hartford. ETN 3, Samuel Ramos, headed to USS Ronald Reagan. Lieutenant Junior Grade Samuel Rice, headed to USS Columbia. EMN 3, Daniel Riggin, headed to USS Georgia. EMN 3, Mia Roberts, headed to PCU, New Jersey. MMN 3, Jonathan Roldan, headed to USS Vermont. MMN 3, Wadis Rose, headed to PCU, Massachusetts. ETN 3, Cade Schreiber, headed to USS Harry S. Truman. Ensign Bridget Severs, headed to USS Louisiana. ETN 3, Brendan Shanahan, headed to USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. Ensign Sophia Sherman, headed to USS John Warner. Ensign Juliana Sildorf, headed to USS Michigan. MMN 3, Ryan Smith, headed to ELT school. ETN 3, Aaron Smith, headed to USS George Washington. MMN 3, Alexander Smith, headed to PCU John F. Kennedy. MMN 3, Kenneth Smith, headed to ELT school. MMN 3, Cody Smith, headed to USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. MMN 3, Stephen Stanford, headed to USS George Washington. MMN 3, Natalia Stiles, headed to USS Michigan. Ensign Aaron Tanman, headed to USS Maine.
Hey, congratulations. I know work for your dad.
ETN 3, Jacob Thompson, headed to USS Asheville.
You're the man. Congratulations.
Ensign Austin Thompson, headed to USS Maryland.
Well done, well done.
ETN 3, Ann Thorson, headed to USS Florida. MMN 3, Cyrus Todd, headed to USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. EMN 3, Renee Torres, headed to USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. EMN 3, Alexander Tweets, headed to USS John C. Stennis. MMN 3, Bryce Van Hooser, headed to USS Ronald Reagan. MMN 3, Catherine Vanderlaan, headed to ELT school. BMN 3, Kevin Vanker Aguirre, headed to USS Gerald R. Ford. Ensign Andrew Waldron, headed to USS Connecticut. EMN 3, Adam Watson, headed to USS George H.W. Bush. MMN 3, Rafe Wheeler, headed to ELT school. Ensign Emily Wilson, headed to USS Wyoming. Mr. Jake Womack, headed to train on MTS 701. EMN 3, George Wooten, headed to USS Nimitz. EMN 3, Julian Zane, headed to USS North Carolina. ETN 3, Alexander Zani, headed to USS Pasadena. All right, please give a round of applause for all of our graduates. Chaplain Brady will now deliver the invocation. Correction, the benediction.
Shall we pray? Now, O gracious Lord, as this graduation comes to an end and we prepare to leave this place, we ask that your loving presence go with us. When adversity comes to us as we attempt to stand our watch, be near us. When anxiety shackles our hearts and grips our minds, steady us. So as we look back in thanksgiving and forward to our future with abiding hope, we ask all these things in your holy name. Amen.
Thank you, Chase. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our graduation ceremony. Thank you very much for attending. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day at Patriots Point and in Charleston. Once again, congratulations to the graduates, and thank you, family, friends, and shipmates for being here today. On behalf of the commanding officer, technical director, Site Command Master Chief, I wish you all fair winds and following seas. NPTU Charleston, attention, dismissed.